This one's for the culture. Me and wifey in the room thinking of a master plan, thinking how we can influence the culture from where we stand. Knowing that our steps are ordered by the master's hand, still 10 toes down, we ain't switching up the stance. The mission of this music ain't just to make them dance, trying to tell them about the rock.
And welcome to the next and newest edition of the Bond Chronicles. I am Mr. Ray Bond on Twitter and Mr. Bond Chronicles on Instagram, and I'm blessed to be here with my host,
Mrs. Bond Chronicles on Instagram, Ms. Bond Chronicle on Twitter, because there's no S on my Twitter name.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just let you go with it because when I was having the issue with me getting my whole name, and you said you figured it out, but not important. The point is you remembered your name either way. So thank you all for joining us here again on episode 22. We are moving right along, continuing to do new things in an even greater and better way. So today we want to get into some relationship talk. We've had a number of those, and from listening to some of the members that have been watching us and our subscribers, this seems to be an interest for you guys. So we want to make sure that we are giving you guys content that's relevant for you all. So we want to start with something that I guess, in my opinion, I've heard it can be kind of controversial, but it also can be in some ways revolutionary. So, and you always do this, but that's fine. The 80-20 rule. And I will give my understanding because we had a bit of a disagreement on what this 80-20 rule and how it functions. And then I'll kind of let you get into your part and we'll go from there. So what I understand the 80-20 rule to be is an understanding that nobody's perfect, right? Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has shortcomings. Some people can have almost everything, but then they got some stuff that you just can't stand. And so 80% of them is great, perfect for you. Everything that you could ever dream of, everything that you ever prayed to God for, they got it. But there's that 20% that you would never pray for and that you would never want someone to have, and they got that too. And so how do you balance that in dealing with relationships and fulfillment? That's my 80-20 understanding. Is that your understanding, or do you have a different view as a woman?
I mean, that's essentially what it is. You and your partner, you're never going to find someone who is 100% everything you've ever wanted and dreamed of. At best, they say you'll get 80%. And then that other 20% is just like, it'd be great. But realistically, they have all these other things. So I can live without that other 20%.
Got it.
So, yeah.
So my question in this is that true, and is that sustainable? So one, do you believe that no one is the total package? No one can be smart, educated, funny, in great shape, great dad, great husband, great wife, professional at work, checks all the boxes. And if so, can that last? Can you be with someone forever and stay happy if you know that there are deficiencies that they have?
It depends on what the deficiencies are. I think a lot of times it's the 20% that becomes blaringly obvious that the person lacks when there's conflict. It's like, any other day, you're straight, I love you to pieces, and everything is great. But on those days where I might not like you so much, the guy who is more empathetic and caring, or whatever it may be, he's like, that's who I should have been with. It should have been somebody like that. And you're forgetting about all the other things that the person has that make you happy. So it really depends on, I think a lot of it is what your deal breakers are. Because if something that is a deal breaker for you is in the 20% that the person is lacking, then it might be a difficult ask to say that I'm going to be with this person forever when one of your major relationship deal breakers that person doesn't have.
So the last point I do agree with. I would like to believe that you figure that out before you get into the relationship, like
Not
long
necessarily
term.
and that's the thing,
Like, if it's a deal breaker, shouldn't you have that conversation early?
I mean, you can have the conversation early, but a lot of times, especially nowadays, people will look at a person and be like, oh, well, they check this box and they check this box and they make this amount of money and they come from this kind of family. You know, like they check all these other boxes that said person might find important. And the deal breaker doesn't seem so major weighed up against all those other things until like a moment of conflict or you know, your relationship is tested. And hopefully, like you said, you're not at the point where you can't just escape the relationship. Mm-hmm. But if you're not, and like you're committed to this person, it could be rough. I mean, because even when you look at our relationship, like we've known each other for almost 20 years, but there's a lot that we didn't know about each other in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Before we got married. And, we weathered the storms and, navigated through those issues. But even still, it's like in the back of your head, it's like what I have still gone through or what I have made the same decisions that I made had I known all these different little nuanced things. I think so. It depends on the relationship.
I mean, I agree, but I feel like I feel like you knew what my deal breakers were. And so even in the short time frame that we had with everything and the way that it transpired, I still feel like we had a good understanding of well, at least I feel like I was clear because I actually don't know exactly what your deal breakers may have been, but I'm great. So that's not really a problem. But I would like to believe that people are having those kind of conversations either directly or organically. You can kind of figure out when you make mistakes that maybe they really hate lying or they really don't like people that are bad with money or what have you. Mm-hmm. So the next part to that is, okay, so assuming you find out that it is a deal breaker and you find out that it is a problem, but you are already committed, then what do you do?
And that's a whole can of worms, because it's like we'll just go with a married couple. And you figure out or you discover, however you discover that this person is lacking in a major way for you. Like, one, you have to voice that. Like, you can't just keep it bottled up. You can't just eat it because that's going to become a lot of toxic energy that's just waiting to overflow into a conversation about nothing. And then it's a huge argument about everything. So you definitely have to communicate it. And then your partner has to be able to say, okay, I can work on this. I can fix that. I can, make adjustments. And then depending on what it is, your partner can be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, no, that's not the person I am. That's not the person I want to be, which within itself could be an issue because when you get married, like there is no more I and I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. It's we. Mm-hmm. So if your partner is not willing to accommodate, then you have to figure out why they're not willing to accommodate. And then depending on where that conversation goes, you have to decide if what you consider a deal breaker to be truly a deal breaker or if it's something that you can live without in the relationship long term. And that's like a whole kind of like a come to Jesus moment because it's you basically saying, even though this is something that I really want in my partner, I'm willing to sacrifice said thing for you because I want everything else that you are. But you make that sacrifice and then 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, however far, down the line in the relationship, you can't just be like, I sacrificed this, that, and the third for you, and you can't even, like that's not what love is. And that's never going to be something that I think makes a relationship last or anything like that, when you're constantly throwing in your partner's face all the things that you've quote unquote given up for them.
That's good. So no, I definitely agree with that part. As far as once you commit to taking on whatever that 20% is, that you're right. It's really bad to then bring that up as something that you bring up, I guess, in relation to them, or as a detriment, or like, I carried this for you. So no, I definitely agree with that to a certain extent. I do think that there are times that people need to be reminded that you are carrying said weight, whatever that is. It could be issues from their childhood. It could be trauma from any kind of situation.
But why do they need to be reminded? Because it's not that the partner doesn't know.
But I think people do lose perspective and they get comfortable. And so, like, I was watching something on, I think it was the internet, and sometimes, I forget the way it was worded, but basically it was like, sometimes you in essence almost have to disrespect someone to let them know that you weren't disrespecting them.
What?
Let me finish. So a lot of times when people are in relationships, said the opposite party is dealing with a lot. Yeah. They're eating a lot. They're tolerating a lot. I'll even use in our situation, like, you're pregnant. And I think we've already put it out, so that's not a surprising.
Yeah, we're pregnant, guys.
We're pregnant. I don't know if you told our podcast.
We didn't tell the podcast.
So we didn't do that, but we put it on our personal pages. But yes, we are expecting our fourth child.
Fourth and final.
So yeah, that should hopefully by the end of the year, for tax purposes, we'd love to sneak old Johnny, or what's the J? No, Johnny's a woman. What's a J name?
Jane.
Yeah, that's so white.
Janet.
That's still white.
Jessica. I don't know.
We don't have any black J names.
Jasmine.
Jasmine works. Anyway, so we don't know what we're having yet.
Oh, boys, stop. Yeah, we don't know what we're having yet. We find out next month.
Yeah. So sidebar. So yeah, we have that going on. But in our situation, I feel like the onus, I'm not even going to use historically. So in our situation, I feel like there are days you don't feel great. And in those times, it's on me to, whether it be sometimes where for a little while I was doing more of the dishes, whether it was allowing you to rest so that I would take care of the kids and then try and help Courtney with her homework, or whatever it was, that became, in essence, my responsibility. And for me, that would be the 20%, because I'm working. I have my entire whole other life that I'm trying to do and live in this household. And now the quote unquote things that you should be handling, I'm now having to handle. So the reason I say sometimes you have to remind people is because people can get caught up in them. And so when you're so caught up in you don't realize what's happening for the other person. And that could be stressing the other person out. That could be causing a detriment to the other person. And hopefully that's a good thing. And so with that, you can lose sight of the other individual. And sometimes that person needs to remind you and say, hey, like, I don't mind doing this, and I'm doing this for whatever the reason is. But the reality of the situation is it's wearing me out. Yeah. And so that's what I'm more so, as I mean,
it's not necessarily disrespect. Okay, I get what you're saying.
I'm not saying like throw it in their face like, you sucker, you got pregnant, and I hate the fact that now I have to do this. I'm not saying that. But sometimes I might need to say, hey, listen, like, I need a moment because it's been a lot and I want to help, and I understand I have to help, but I also don't want you to lose fact that I am helping.
Yeah.
So that's more so what I mean from the reminder.
Like I said, I guess it really just depends on how you communicate or you come off in that relationship, in that respect. Because again, like, for your example, we'll just keep working with that.
Yeah.
For your example, and this is something that we bump heads with a little bit sometimes. Like, I feel like if there's anything lacking or something that either of is missing as far as the household goes, it's not necessarily my responsibility or your responsibility. It's got to get done when it's got to get done, how it's got to get done. And whether somebody feels good, or somebody's sick, or what's happening, especially for the person who's going to complain about it. Like, if you're the one who's upset that something hasn't been done, then just do it. And but that's how I look at it, because at the end of the day, yes, I did decide to take on this role or this responsibility or this place in, our relationship. But if for whatever reason I'm falling behind or lacking in that area in that moment, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. Now, something it shouldn't, like, I don't think it should be that big of an issue.
That's fair. That's your perspective.
Now, when it comes to other things that are more made, especially like when you start talking about sex and stuff like that, like, especially in marriage, if your partner is not doing something that you want them to do, or maybe you're not having as much sex as you want to, or just, there's so many different nuances. And then obviously money. Money is always a big thing for married couples. Like, those are typically the two reasons why people get divorced, like two of the biggest contributing factors.
I agree with that.
If you're not discussing that with your partner at length, and one partner feels like everything is on them all the time, like, it's going to become a problem. And if the other partner is not hearing how much of a problem it is, or not trying to come up with solutions or lessen the financial burden, like, it becomes a problem. And it's really, I don't think there's really any super easy way to tell your partner, yo, if you don't chill out, like, I'm leaving you because we're gonna be broke because of you. Like, I think it just depends on how you word stuff like that.
I mean, I think that's in life, wording is important. But you mentioned your perspective. And I believe that is where a lot of people fall short, in that the expectation is just, well, it needs to get done, so you can do it, so you should do it. And I think I'm going to go out on the limb here and say I think that's a man thing. That I feel like that criteria is put on men, not on women. When when women feel like they have to carry the extra load for a man, the man's a sucker, he's a bama, he's a loser. Like, there's a bunch of negative aspects and connotations that go with that type of man if a woman is carrying the slack. Vice versa, it's the man's responsibility, and it's perfectly fine if he has to carry the weight of the woman. And like, we're getting a little bit, a lot of bit of, no, it's not getting ahead of ourselves. It's something that we were going to talk about in another pod. But Kevin Samuels recently said that men should cover all the women's bills. And I'm not with that. I know we live in this modern era and all of that, but one, I just, especially not where we live, I think that's highly unlikely and very it's not feasible. And I think that goes back to the happy wife, happy life adage that has been a part of our culture since I've been alive, really, or had anything to do with relationships. And it's not just an American thing. We've heard it in other countries. And it's okay to be miserable as the man if your wife's happy. But God forbid it be the other way around. It doesn't work. And that, to me, is problematic. And so when you're talking about the 80-20 aspect, if that 80-20 initially starts a certain way, but now the 80-20 starts to become more 60-40 because other stuff are being added to the person's, their deficiencies because whatever reason, like, I think that's going to cause an unnecessary strain. And if that is extended, I think the relationship will fail.
I disagree. With a few things that you said. One, I think a lot of that, man pays the bills or whatever, it really breaks down to relationship. I know a lot of women who work full time, do whatever they have to do, and their husbands, boyfriends, whatever in the case may be, the person that they're living with, like they still take care of like mortgage, rent, the major bills, and then they use their money to pay like household stuff. Um, I would say, I mean, I've told you, like my mom always said, your husband should be able to take care of you. But in any situation, should it arise, you should also be able to take care of your family, your husband, children, everyone, if something happens to him. So, not necessarily completely living off of your spouse, but be prepared to bolster them in whatever way, shape, or form should the situation change. um we've seen a bunch of like little memes on like old stuff on social media where guys pretend to either like lose their jobs or quit their jobs where they were making a large amount of money, and their girlfriends would have to either subsidize their lifestyle or put a big one. I think one was like their wedding. The gentleman said that the he needed to put a pause on a wedding that they could barely afford, because he was taking like a sabbatical from work or something like that. And the woman's response, oh, he was taking time away from work for mental health reasons.
Because she had got a job.
Right. Um, and her response to all of it, like it was just out of this world. She was pissed because he wanted to postpone the wedding. She was pissed because if they did have the wedding, it wasn't going to be the wedding that she wanted. Like she didn't want to embarrass herself in front of all her friends and family. And he was like, most of these people you don't even like. Like we're just inviting them so that you can look fancy. Like we can use this money, put things on hold, and then in a few months when I find a better job and I'm in a better position, like we can have the wedding of your dreams. She wasn't with it. And basically she was like, if you tell me to postpone my wedding, I'm leaving you. And he was like, are you serious? Like you would really, really leave me because of this? And she was like, yeah, I'm dead serious. And it turned out that he was he had already started going to therapy.
He had been going.
And his therapist was helping him deal with loyalty issues that he was dealing with. And this was his way of testing his fiance's loyalty to him. And she failed the test miserably. And, you know, obviously we don't know what happened after that, but we can assume that he broke it off. Um, I don't think, especially financially, like when you start talking about feelings and finances, it always can get super heated. Um, I don't think it's ever really going to be equal. Um, Especially depending on what your industries are, what your line of work is, all of those factor into everything. One person could be super frugal and just not like to spend money. The other person, you know, extravagant, likes all the expensive things, all the designer things. They want to go here, they want to go there. Like everybody views different money so differently. When you're in a relationship with someone, especially when you're in a relationship with someone who is financially illiterate and you're trying to explain to them why you can't spend money on this or why you have to spend the money on that, regardless of how much money is being made or being brought into the household, if everyone doesn't understand what it's being delegated for, that plays a major role. And a lot of times in today's society, it is looked upon to the man to be the head of the house financially. Uh, and I don't think that's always right. Just because I know a lot of women that manage money super well. Um, and so it should really be dependent upon your relationship. We don't say happy wife, happy life. We say happy spouse, happy house, because we both recognize that we need things from each other so that our marriage is lasting and sustainable. Um, A lot of it, I think, is unlearning what other people's expectations are for your relationship. Because over the years, like, people pour all this relationship advice into you. And then you get to the final stage, you're married. And a lot of times, none of that advice necessarily works for you and the person that you married. And you have to find the line where this is what I think works, and this is what you think works, and this is how we can be as much as we can be for each other. 80, 20, or whatever the case may be. But I don't think in a lot of ways it's ever completely equal.
Gotcha. No, I agree with the end point that it's never completely equal. Uh, I'm more so speaking to the ideology of, we talked about a couple pods ago, the woman who said, once we break up, you still need to take care of me. We look at a situation where Dr. Dre's wife just got 300,000 or $283,000 a month for support.
Alimony?
Yeah, like, I just, I hear you, and there are some women, that do things a certain way, but societally, it's still put on the man to always carry the extra. If it's child support, it's almost always the man that's paying. If it's spousal support, it's almost always the man that's paying, regardless of what transpired that caused the marriage to fail. Um, and so when you're talking about, the 80-20 part, I think it's more difficult sometimes as the man, because I think the thing is, it starts as 80-20, but one, people evolve and change. And so as people evolve and change, if that 20% grows into something else, and it could be a life situation that happens, then how do you work through that? And I would never put these men on the spot that you were talking about, but I talk to men, and I'm starting to talk to more and more men, and some of them are fine with it, and a lot of them are older, so they were kind of raised in that older ideology of just taking care of it and covering it, and that is what it is. I think when you talk to younger men and you give them that scenario, I don't know how open they are to taking on that extra, of being that knight in shining armor, as much as they are. And we had the flip side to that is, we read the story about the man that took the girl on vacation with his family.
Mm-hmm.
And they were an affluent family. I think she was a school teacher.
Yeah.
And she did something else.
For the sake of the vacation, she knew that the vacation was going to be expensive. So she picked up a part-time job waitressing to help save more money up for the trip.
And they had been splitting everything up to that point.
Right.
I think he made well over six figures. His family was affluent. And on that vacation, in essence, he held true to what they had agreed to, 50-50. And I think he might have, I don't know if he embellished or was just kind of cold-hearted to put it out there, but he said there were times he could hear her stomach growling because she was hungry. And she didn't say nothing, and he didn't offer. And his response was, if you were going to be miserable, and I think there were some things that changed in the itinerary that she hadn't planned for. But I would argue that in their relationship, there were going to be other situations where he's going to want to go out for his birthday. He's going to want to go out and do things that she potentially can't afford to do. And so if when her birthday comes around, he spends, and we're just going to throw a figure, say 10 grand on her birthday, because I'm just throwing a number.
Yeah.
And say that's what we want. And we watch rappers and entertainers buy these women all these cars all the time. Quavo bought Sweetie a Bentley. Somebody bought, I think, Young Miami a new thing. Like, that happens. Men tend to, quote unquote, trick on women, however you want to word it or phrase it. But when his birthday comes around, if all she can afford is 2 grand, and then when he's out in his corporate professional environment, he runs into a woman that can give him a 10 grand birthday to match his energy, even though the one at home has 80%, but that 20% is small, I think that's going to become a problem. And over time, that 20% and that potential resentment is going to grow. Because it's not just this 1 year you didn't have it, but if year after year after year, anniversary gifts are highly skewed your way. I'm just using you as in this example. if all gift giving, if all of the expectations in life and all the trips and things eventually get to a point where, because a lot of people were killing this guy and saying he should have just taken care of it, he should have covered it. And that's where I'm saying the 20% grows. So if that's that vacation, what happens on future vacations? Going forward, that's going to become part of their relationship that they didn't agree to. And for him, I can imagine that would build resentment. And if he finds someone else that can meet that, or to, I think you alluded to earlier, kind of scratch that 20% itch, I think that makes it more likely for him to want to pursue that and potentially throw away the 80%. But at the time, that 20% is going to seem way bigger.
And that is what happens sometimes. Like I said, I don't think the 20% isn't important to you. It's, can you live without that 20% from the person who's giving you everything else that you want in the relationship? And again, it depends on what the 20% is, how important it is to you. If it's, the person be financially secure, do you think that person is going to get to a point, be in a point in their life where they can match you financially? Most people, especially young people, and especially young people now, like, earning potential is skyrocketing because a lot of people are deciding to do businesses for themselves. There's so many new ways to make money. But if you want somebody that's got money right now, then you might not want to sit around and wait for their business to become profitable, or for their, I don't know, them to get a promotion or win that next big case or whatever it may be. But then at the same time, I think the 20% is what tests your loyalty to said person. Because you said that the 20% can grow or shrink and become skewed in one way or another. Well, yeah, that happens, but it's happening on both sides. So all the things that you feel that person is lacking, they probably feel like you're lacking something too. And that's when communication, again, I think plays a huge role in it. Because if you're just eating, the resentment or whatever feeling that you may have that the person isn't giving you everything that you want, then yes, a few years down the line, you're going to be pissed. You're going to want to argue, and you're going to run into somebody who's got those two little things that you think would make you so much happier. Meanwhile, your partner is sitting at home, like, or, they're living their life, and they're just like, dang, I just wish he was more supportive of, since we're working with money, I wish he was more supportive of my business. I wish he'd share my posts. I wish he would come to these functions with me. I wish he'd network with me. And then while you're out in a, party, you meet someone who's doing the same thing that you're doing. He's, got a startup or whatever the case may be. And you see that he's out here grinding. He's not already rich, and he's not all these things. So it's just like, what a breath of fresh air. He's so dope. And so then it works both ways. And I guess I'm a hopeless romantic. I like to think that in a relationship, when you really care about somebody, regardless of the things that you may feel they lack, if you can communicate with them and you can come to an understanding, or you can work through what you both may be missing from the other person, I don't feel like that the 20%, we keep calling it, is enough to throw away someone who really makes you happy. So, but again, I know I am a romantic. I like to think that all stories have happy endings and are super lovey-dovey, and the world is just full of sunshine, roses, and kisses. But I know that not to be the case.
Interesting. So yeah, I think communication is key. And I think kind of to that point of communication, we have someone I referenced earlier that in some ways I would say they're a great communicator. And in other ways I would say they're a really, really poor communicator.
I tell, so he's talking about Mr. Kevin Samuels, y'all. Like, unless you live under a rock, it's kind of hard to have not heard about him through some form of media these days. He is a very interesting man. I will say that his opinions they're hot. They are. His opinions are hot. And they're hot because at current time, he's talking a lot about women, but specifically to Black women. And unlike a lot of his predecessors, like Steve Harvey, Derek Jackson, if people still listen to him, all those quote unquote relationship, love, life gurus, Kevin Samuels does not mince words. And he
overshares.
It can come off really rough, to say the least. Like, I've watched him quite a few times. I do follow him on social media because, one, he's entertaining, and two, like, I think he does say things that people need to hear, but not just women, men as well. Like, a big thing about him right now is a lot of people feel like he's specifically attacking Black women, bringing them down, shaming them for this, that, and the third. And he's been invoking a lot of negative emotions from Black women. And I'd say some men do also agree that his way of advice ain't it. And so people want him off YouTube, right? To remove.
I think it's the internet in general.
I mean, you can't get somebody off the internet.
Well, off of platforms that he can share his voice. YouTube and Instagram.
And so, how many signatures does it have?
I think like 15.
Oh, so they need 25,000, and at recording time, they've got 15, almost 16,000. I don't know. Again. Oh, you go ahead. You tell me what you think about Mr. Kevin Samuels. Like, I know how you feel about Kevin Samuels, but go ahead and share your view with the people.
So turn on your misogynist hats here. We're
gonna lose some female followers. I'm sorry, y'all.
But and that is perfect. And that's the problem. Because like you said, I'm about to share my opinion. And I've seen this talked about on so many podcasts. I've seen this talked about in so many different things. When men say things that women don't like, they
don't want to hear it.
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I've heard women even admit to this, and some almost like a badge of honor, like, yeah, we're not contradictory. Yeah, we're hypocritical. Like, yes, we don't take accountability for actions. And y'all like that's okay. And I've seen like prominent women
don't say y'all
say this. Y'all as women.
Oh, okay.
So my frustration with this change.org petition, and just in general, is I feel like there's been a course correction in society, and women empowerment, feminist movement, Me Too, and all of that, this swell that's occurred has grossly overcorrected itself from the days of, what's the color purple and other things where women were basically property, and women were treated as less than, and women had to walk behind a man, and women were just eye candy. And so obviously that was wrong, and women deserved way more than that. But I think we've overcorrected to the point where you can't say anything critical of a woman. You can't address anything of a woman. And if you say she's too big, you're body shaming. If you say she's too small, then you're criticizing that. You can't talk about her hair. Her whole entire body could be fake, and you're supposed to just embrace and appreciate it. And that's not realistic, and it's not going to work. And so what Kevin Samuels does to me is he colorfully provides realism to these conversations. And women will say, I want this type of man. And a lot of the type of man that they're speaking to or they want, he is it. And he's telling you what people like him want, what high earning, high value men want. And their response set is, no, you shouldn't want that. or it's wrong of you to say I don't deserve that kind of man because
I look like this,
because I'm
or
an average woman. And when you say a woman's average, obviously you called me average or basic or anything like that.
what is it? I think one of the biggest points that
Sexual marketplace value.
Yeah, so he says it's a woman's sexual marketplace value. That within itself, like even I'm just like that's a little cringy. It just is. But it's on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, what do you look like with no makeup? No, like what do you look like when you wake up in the morning? Um, and that's a big factor into where your value lies. And then like how much money you make, how old are you, how many kids do you have? And all of those numbers help him decide what your value is. And on his show, a lot of times he'll ask a woman, what do you think your SMP is? And she'll
SMV.
SMV, yeah. Um, and he said you can't use the number seven. You can't use 7. 1 through 10, no 7. And a lot of them will say like 6. Someone will, some of them will jump out there and be like 8, 9. And Kevin will very immediately correct them.
But it's not even correct them. He would challenge them. And this is something
Yes.
that I do often. If you give me an answer, okay, you can have that answer, but explain it to me. And so when he starts pressing them on questions of the categories you mentioned, age, children, past relationships, all of that, it said you start to say, so you're saying you're here, but as a high value man, what I'm hearing is you're actually here. Because as a man, and I know this sucks to hear, but in the power position, it's like, why do I want all of that? I can get the best of the best. So that's what I'm going to want. So if you're bringing, attitude, if you're bringing children, if you're bringing age, if you're bringing a look that doesn't appeal, then
what exactly is your value to me as a high value man?
And when women have to look in the mirror and say, okay, you're right, they don't say, okay, you're right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who says okay, you're right?
They start to justify and trying to explain, and then
They
it goes
attack
left.
him.
And so naturally, he typically lets them go, and it's a conversation. And then he's finally like, listen, this is what it is. This is who you are. I wouldn't want you. And he hangs up on them. And then he usually talks some trash after they're gone.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just an imbalance. And so the point of this new petition is, one, you've made it when they start trying to get rid of you. For me, if I'm him, that would be my advice to him. You obviously have gotten to a point that people are going out of their way to try and get rid of you. So I would argue you're doing something right. The second piece of that is, I've never heard him advocate for violence towards women. Now, is he critical of women? Absolutely. But I'm sure he's probably used the B word and some other maybe profane language.
Mm-hmm. But it's no different from any of the language that a lot of men, especially podcaster, personality people,
rappers, entertainers, regular people use, or women use. And that's a whole different conversation on groups using words that other people can't. But I think that's the miss for me. If you don't like him or don't believe in his platform, don't watch.
And that's a really big...
And don't call in.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Like, me personally, I got it, man. I don't need somebody else to tell me if me and said man should split up, how likely it is going to be for me to find a new man. Like, I know who I am. I know what, I'm not calling into his show for him to judge. I mean, because that's what he's doing. He's judging you. I'm not doing it. And the women that call in are always the stereotype of woman that he's talking about. Like, there's never once that I've watched where the specific type of woman that he's quote unquote attacking has called in and proved him to be wrong
Right.
about his opinion. And there's something that's like not clicking for people, and I don't understand that. If you know that, and I think it's just they do it so that
Because
they
they're
can
hard-headed.
somehow validate themselves. Like, well, I talked to him and I let him know that I'm not this and I'm not that. And
It's the Floyd Mayweather.
I
It's
just don't get it.
It's the idea that we want to be the one that gets him.
That takes him down.
We're going to prove him wrong and put him in his place and tell him off in front of everybody on his platform. And many keep trying,
and they
many
all
keep failing.
fail because at the end of the day, Mr. Kevin Samuels has all the power. If he doesn't want to listen to you anymore, if you get loud, if you get belligerent, once you start calling him gay and all these things like that, and the third, he hangs up. Like,
and then proceeds to talk his
and talks the most trash about you. And there's nothing you can do because even if you call back to get back on the live, he just rejects the phone call.
Right.
So like that within itself is just asinine to me. But then again, like trying to get him canceled. Do you know how many other things deserve to not be on social media for people to see and expose themselves to? Kevin Samuels, like him and his opinion, if you don't like it, don't watch it. You don't want to see what he has to say? Don't click the link to his videos or anything like that. But if you're not watching, don't be the person complaining about him through hearsay of what other people have said. Because I've noticed that a lot. A lot of people comment about him who you can tell have never really listened to the things that he says. Because at the end of the day, though he may be really harsh in what he's saying, a lot of it just boils down to accountability. And a lot of it is the same conversations that we have amongst each other, especially as women. Because, like, women are harsh. We are harsh on each other and we're harsh on ourselves. And we will sit at a table and look at another group of women and we will tear them apart. Her weave don't sit right. That bag is fake. Her lashes are crooked. Like, we will tear women apart. But when a man does it on a public platform and in a way to help build women, then he's wrong. So I the petition is stupid to me. Like, if you don't like him, don't watch him. He doesn't promote violence against women. Like, that is absurd. Like, I've never seen anything like that on any of the shows of his that I've watched. Like, that part to me was like, y'all are doing the most.
Right. And that kind of goes to the sensationalism and shock value to elicit emotion from women. And I think your point is true of him. And we'll talk about Kanye here later on. But that people take small segments of something. And I'm just going to use those two as examples. But there's a bunch of people that fit this criteria.
Yeah.
And they run with what they heard out of context. They run what they heard like you said, as hearsay. They didn't even watch said clip. They didn't even hear said comment. And they just run with it. And that is, it's unfair to him. It's detrimental to the culture because, again, his messaging is problematic for me in a lot of ways. In some ways, it's entertaining, but I understand the problematic aspect of it. One, that's what sells. That's why y'all keep Wendy Williams' sorry self on TV
if
all
Wendy
the time.
Williams can stay on TV, Kevin Samuels can stay on the internet.
Right. And so I think that's part of it. But like you said, accountability is key. And I believe we've lost sight of that. And it's been so much Black queens and taking care and protecting our women that now this is going to sound bad, but almost like a child when you constantly coddle them, even when they're wrong, they grow up and they lose their minds. And then when you try to correct later in life, it's too late. And I think I don't know how to fix it. I think he's really trying and genuinely trying to help people. I think he does do it. Obviously, he's trying to make a living. But I think his mindset and his ideology is to help couples in their relationships.
Right.
And to have...
He is a certified life coach.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, and they always talk about, especially in my job, they say the negative's always going to get more light than the positive. He has tons of people that do pay him for his service, and there's a bunch of testimonials. Now, of course, those people are always going to get pushed down and not talked about, and they're not going to be in the forefront. But I also think that's what helps him go on, because he knows reality of the numbers are most people appreciate him. And every time that I've jumped on his live, it's a bunch of men constantly giving him money, and women as well. So he's hit a chord. I think he's on the right path. I get the direction he has to go in. We are not really that kind of podcast. That I could say some more inflammatory or incendiary stuff to try to go viral. I don't believe that's us, so we don't do that.
No.
But for the people that do, absolutely. The people that do, I don't necessarily kill them for it, because I think that's on the listener to be able to filter through or take the meat and spit out the bones or the milk or whatever the weird phrases people use. But yeah, that's really all that we had on that. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys in your relationships are finding the 80-20 balance. If you have someone that you think is everything and they meet all the boxes and they're 90-10 or 100-0, we would love to hear it.
100-0. Like, that sounds ridiculous.
I mean, they're probably cheating, lying, and beating you, but they or they're a psychopathic killer who hasn't killed you yet.
Oh, Jesus.
But yeah, that is really the episode for this week. So thank you again for your time and your attention. Please make sure that you continue to subscribe, continue to like, share, comment. I know I've talked to a couple of y'all who said y'all been watching, and I said, well,
hey y'all,
run those numbers up on the liking and sharing. We've got some good feedback from a couple people on some of our last couple videos, so thank you to that. But again, in life, things happen. You have the power to choose what you do. Choose wisely. And again, men and women, always bet on you.